how many leads per year are most builders generating?
Yeah, very few, in all honesty. The data reveals that builders are way too reliant on referrals, which kind of puts them into this difficult situation where they become dependent on too few leads, and then end up dropping their margin in, as times get tougher, in order to make sure they convert those leads. In terms of the lead conversion, like you say, those organic leads, they do convert way higher. In terms of, especially when you compare it to paid advertising, where we suggest the ratio that builders need to be prepared for is around about 100 to 1. Is leads generated, not marketing qualified leads or sales qualified leads. It is leads, but it's about 100 to 1 on paid. And a lot of people will look at that and think, no way am I spending all that money to generate 100 leads just to get one contract. And it does vary. And obviously over the last 2 years, that ratio has been smashed because it's been a lot easier. This is more of a typical ratio that you'd see for a typical building company. But the important thing is the numbers still work. You can generate just one contract out of 100 paid leads, and that is still profitable. So, and that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day.
And absolutely. And that was one of the things that I saw that was quite concerning is when I'm only relying on word of mouth. Really, what I'm assuming is that the very good nature of my client, they are going to go out of their way to think of me and tell their friends, family, coworkers, or neighbors that they should use me as their builder of choice. But you touched on this as well. We all know that that client referral lead converts the very, very high. It's the best type of lead we can get. We all know the conversion is so high because the trust that was established between you and your client was then transferred over to the new lead, and it's a much quicker sale. But at the same time, and I'm assuming you talked about this in your marketing and margins podcast, because I'm only generating a handful of leads, even though they're high quality leads and they might convert well, I'm still somewhat at the mercy of these leads, right? So I can get a bad referral lead too, just like I can get a bad organic lead or paid lead.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, generally referrals are fantastic leads. You can even typically get a higher margin out of those referred leads because there's so much trust and authority already there. But like you say, you don't want to be relying on them. They should be the cream on the top. Shouldn't form the basis of your business. And again, that all comes back to supply and demand, which is the key in business. And that links us into a strategy that I know you speak to your builders a lot about, Rick, and that is construction slots. And construction slots is the strategy of mapping out your availability for the year ahead and limiting, actually capping your supply in line with that plan. And then, of course, the goal is to generate more demand than you can supply, because that helps you to increase margins. And when you got your margins at the correct level, that's when you can then scale up the next year. But I think it's very important that you don't increase your supply to meet the demand, because you just end up on the treadmill then. And the guys that aren't doing this, these are the ones that are in a vicious cycle. They're not spending money on advertising, or they're not spending enough, so they're not generating enough leads, which means they are working on lower margins. They're getting lower lead flow, so less opportunities. And in their mind, they then can't afford to spend money on advertising. So they're trapped in this vicious cycle that they can't seem to break out of. And you have to be bold. Like you say, you've got to plug those leaks first. Yeah, you don't want to be spending money ramping up the advertising when your website's got leaks. But you also want to fix up your margins, and you do those basics first. And then you have to be bold. You have to invest in yourself and invest in your business, and you'll reap the rewards.
We used to, when I was a sales training, we learned a technique called controlled release of information. It's where you would provide just enough information to the lead to make them to want to come back to you and get more information. And I think it's a great analogy looking at production selling, is that I'm going to control the release of slot. And so therefore I have fewer slots, more opportunities, and then I can pick and choose the best people for those slots. So two things that have come up that I've heard. One is, well, I don't want to take on too much business, to which I say, you know, I don't understand this myself. I'm not a psychologist, but for some reason, the bigger backlog you have, the more desirable you are. So talking to a client, he said, I've got a 12, 15 month backlog. I'm telling people I can't get to their job until 16 months. And usually their answer is, we'll wait. You know, it's like, if everyone else wants you, I want you too.
It's how we're wired, isn't it? We've been wired to desire scarce resources, and it's kind of so obvious. It sits in front. It's why we have two restaurants. One's empty, the other has a queue. People would rather wait in line to, especially if you're new in town. You know, which restaurant shall I go to? Well, I'll queue up for this one.
Absolutely. Well, so let's switch over to sales. So we talked about all the hard work that's going into marketing and generating leads. But I really want to ask you, what is the impact that you see of a scripted sales process? And then the follow-up question to that is what percentage of builders do have a documented sales process with scripts?
Yeah, sales process is absolutely massive in a building company. And I think probably even more important than a lot of other industries, because our sales cycle is so long. And it's interesting. It's how the Association of Professional Builders came into being, because we started out as a marketing agency for residential home builders, and we were generating quality leads through Facebook and Google and building websites. And when we spoke to our clients, half of them were saying, this is great, solved my problem, I'm sorted. They were happy. But the other half was saying the leads are rubbish. Yeah, they're not as warm as the leads I normally get. They're not converting. So when we dug deeper, we found the difference between these two sets of builders. The ones that were struggling did not have a documented, repeatable sales process. And that is why in 2014, we launched Acris Sales Training, which then became the Association of Professional Builders. But it all started by mapping out this sales process, because the builders, although they were getting the same quality leads generated, they weren't able to convert them simply because they didn't have a repeatable process. And even now, it's while it's disappointing that only around about half of building companies do have a documented sales process in place, it still is an improvement on 2021 when only 45% had one in place. So this is all about progress, not perfection, I guess. Are seeing the industry get more and more professional. What is significant, however, is that companies that do have a documented sales process in place are approximately 4 times more likely to achieve industry standard gross margins of 25% and above, and that equates to a 33.3% markup. So the proof is in the data. You put a sales process in place, you will be able to increase your margin.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You know, you go onto a lot of builders' websites, and one of the things you see that's probably most common is it'll say free estimate. You know, ask me for a free estimate. Click here to get a free estimate. You do a form, and you fill it out, and I guess you get a free estimate from that. So that's often used to entice that lead inquiry. But of course, that goes into your sales process as well. So what are your feelings on offering these as part of your sales process versus charging for an estimate?
Look, I think free estimates are fine. And in all honesty, they probably should be free because they're pretty much worthless. Now, quotes, however, that is a very different matter, and they must be part of a pre-construction contract, which means paying for the quote. You go out and you actually say to the prospect, I'm going to charge you to quote your job. They can't correlate that because they don't understand the difference between an estimate and a quote. So if you try charging for a quote, they're never going to understand the value. You've got to make that quote part of a pre-construction contract where you deliver other value apart from the quote, and then you get paid to quote, but not in the same way. But education is required for the consumer to actually understand this, because they have no idea how much work goes into producing these fixed price quotes that form a contract. It's weeks of work, and it's not viable for a builder to do that amount of work for free. And once again, the data proves that the builders that charge for quotes, they close a higher percentage of opportunities and they earn higher margins. Proof is there.